Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. My name is Leah, and I'm the Learning Officer for the National Videogame Museum in Sheffield. So I'm really delighted to be joined by Laura, and Georgina for this session to talk about their experiences with computer science, learning C++, and to share these resources from Sumo Digital. So welcome everyone, thank you for joining me. So if our panellists don't mind, I'd love you to introduce yourselves and to tell everyone who you are and what you do or what you study. It might help if I kind of say, I'm not sure which direction I'm pointing, but Lara, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Lara, and I'm Egyptian, and I'm studying mechatronics and robotics engineering in the Sheffield. Glad to be here.
Amazing, thank you. Laura, should I point down?
Hi, I'm Laura. I studied physics at the University of Manchester, and I'm currently self-studying games programming.
Amazing. And Georgina?
Hi, I'm Georgina. I am the recruitment and campus coordinator at Sumo Digital. So I originally had a degree in law, which I didn't really want to do anything with, and have only recently started learning C++ in the past year since I joined Sumo Digital, more as kind of like a hobby and just to get to know a little bit more about what people do in Sumo.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me and talking about your experiences. So over the past sort of 5 weeks, you've been taking part in C++ workshops that have been run by Sumo Digital and with the Sheffield Women in Computer Science Society. So in case anyone out there sort of isn't already aware, C++ is a programming language and it's primarily used in video games, apparently because of its efficiency, but isn't taught on most computer science courses, and it does have a little bit of a reputation for being quite sort of tricky to learn, or to get to grips with at least. So I'd really love to know, sort of, obviously Georgina, you just sort of told us, but what made you decide to start learning C++ and to take part in these workshops? I'd love to know more.
So for me, something that Sumo Digital offer to all employees are learning days, and these are like in addition to your holiday days, and you can use them really in whatever way you'd like. And because I'd been working quite closely with the art recruiter and I had like a very basic understanding of design, I wanted to understand more what, people in code were doing, which is ultimately why I used a couple of learning days last year to pick up some coding in Python and really enjoyed it. So when I was given the opportunity to join in on the workshops this year, it was something that I felt like I really wanted to do. As at school, it wasn't really anything that was offered at that level or, anything that was spoken about. And this was really the first opportunity I felt that I had to do it.
Amazing. And Laura, why did you decide to take part?
I was just, even though I'm still in first year, but I decided to join a couple of webinars. And whenever I joined the webinar for Year in Industries, the jobs there or the companies that would come to the webinars weren't interesting as much to me. But then I saw Sumo Digital, and I just knew about the workshops, and it sounded very interesting, and it was actually really easy to follow up, and just everything that we learned, and we learned it in such a fun way. It just made C++ really nice to learn. Plus, in my module, we kind of, in my course, we program robots to do stuff using C programming and C++. So it allows me to not just explore in game development, but also in programming robots and stuff like that.
Amazing. That's really cool. Okay. And Laura?
So I think I talked to you, Georgina. I was talking about the academy that Sumo Digital does, and applying to that. And Georgina mentioned that there was this workshop going on at the time, and it had already started, but it just seemed like a really good opportunity because I've done some C++ in my degree, but this, I feel like this is a lot more creative. Like when you're making games, it's always, you can kind of, because it's so complicated, like the different functionality, you've got more different ways to solve the problems, kind of thing.
Amazing. Oh, that's really interesting. I love the sort of the differences in all the backgrounds that you've come to these workshops with, and all the applications that it could have as well. So I know that it's not usually recommended that if you're learning programming that you kind of start with C++. So there might be a few people out there who, you know, want to get to grips with C++ but not sure where to start, and might be using these resources. So it might be useful for people to know what kind of background you have in programming, or where you're coming from this sort of from, and if that helped as well. If you had any programming experiences, did that help you get to grips with C++? I'm not sure who wants to start, if anyone. But
I can go first. As I mentioned, I'm a first year. I didn't take any computer science in my A levels. I did IT, but it didn't cover any programming language.
okay.
But then when I started my course, I covered a bit of C programming, and we started the workshops like after semester one. So yeah, almost at the beginning of second semester. So I didn't cover that many topics in C programming, but that background kind of helped guide me through C++, and it was sufficient to get me through the first and second workshop, and then the rest of the stuff basically built on that knowledge and the knowledge I got from the workshops. And yeah, then it went really smoothly later.
That's good. Excellent. Anyone else?
Do you want to go, Laura? Or
I don't mind. You could go first.
So before starting at Sumo Digital, so I started in July last year. I had no programming experience whatsoever. I used a couple of learning days last year to use Pygame, which is like a more basic version of Python, and got very much the very basics of that. And I do think even by just having a couple of days or even playing around with that initially, that has helped understand some of the more complicated aspects of C++. I think if I'd tried to go into that with no experience whatsoever, I probably would have struggled a lot more, even though I do still find it really hard now. It is a tricky thing to learn. It's just persevering and kind of pushing through it.
Cool. And Laura?
I kind of jumped in at the deep end a bit because I took this one course at my uni, and I didn't have any. Well, I had like very, very basic prior programming knowledge, and it was like full on object-oriented C++. So that was a little bit of a shell shock. So after doing that course, I mainly used C# and I used LUA a little bit, but I preferred C#, and I used like Unity and stuff. But it's been nice going back to C++ and being like, oh, actually, I do understand this, you know, because the first time round it was just like so much information at once, kind of thing.
It's definitely tricky. I was following along with a few of those workshops and doing a lot of Googling to try and understand what was going on. But I could kind of follow it, and I've got very little coding experience. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how everything was kind of coming together, and week by week it was becoming a bit easier, I think. Even if a little bit more complicated as well. So can I ask sort of what you ended up like making then in the end? Those of you who kind of followed it through, what were you sort of building? Laura? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, we've been given like a sort of game framework rather than like a sort of full-on engine. So we've got sort of all the utilities in it to be able to, you know, like display it to the screen, and because otherwise C++ is like it's just command line kind of thing. So it, you know, it allows you to sort of have your music and your moving like animations and all of that kind of stuff. And we've kind of been given a lot of creativity, really. We've got like a basic framework of a game, and you can kind of follow that. So at the moment, like I'm gonna try and follow that and like implement the different things, and then maybe build in some other mechanics like later on. But at the moment, I'm kind of doing a similar thing, but we're using the character from the I think it's called Spider, isn't
Yeah.
it? By Sumo Digital. And they're really cute. They're like a little robotic spider. So it's about them being trapped in space kind of thing.
Amazing. So did you find that it kind of helped learning C++ through this kind of like video game framework? Lara, you said that was kind of, it made it a little bit fun. Is that something you think helped when you were learning?
Yeah, definitely. It linking it to a game makes it very much interesting, especially for us youngsters. But yeah, I actually didn't just follow their game. I kind of understood what they did and how they did their characters, how they wrote their code, and the lines of code, and kind of made of my own version. Yeah, I drew some characters and made them move in different ways, different levels and stuff like that. It was really fun. Really.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think once you kind of have the basics and once you kind of understand what's going on, it is something that you can have like a good play around with and create some really fun things. I think it's just this course has been really good for getting to grips with the basics. And I'm kind of doing similar to Laura in the fact that I'm just trying to get through and kind of get like follow along what it is at the moment. And then once I kind of feel more comfortable with what's going on, that's when I think I'll go back and I'll change things and I'll have a play about with different areas to kind of change it and make it a little bit more of my own and like see what works and what ends up breaking it.
That's the
And
fun bit. Sorry.
And then you fix
if I may add, there was also part of the workshops where it introduces you to how things will be in the future if you decide to take a job like that. So it also shows you that how you can arrange your files and stuff like that. So it's really not just about now, it's also about later, which was really beneficial.
So it lets you build on what you've learned and start making your own game maybe in the future as well. That's really cool. That's really interesting. So I was going to ask, did you have any kind of tips or tricks? I've kind of asked you this already, but is there any things that people should keep in mind when they're learning, or anything you found helped, anything like that?
What I know from C programming is that people tend to forget the semicolon, and errors always arise from that. So don't forget the semicolon.
Okay.
It's something I'm still making. I'm still doing the same thing a lot. And I'll have done this big piece of code and I'll try and run it and it'll come back with an error. And I'm like, why? I don't understand. Why not go back? And it will simply be that I've missed a semicolon somewhere. And that's literally the only reason that it won't run. So yeah, I think when I was speaking to Jake about it, who kind of runs the academy side of things, he said this probably the biggest mistake people make when they start to learn C++ is the semicolon.
Okay, that's an excellent tip. Semicolons. Always check for semicolons. Okay. It's always those really simple things with a really long line of code that you end up missing. So that's excellent tips. So have you got a kind of like general advice for talking about your, respective fields, not necessarily video games, but computer science and robotics and physics as well? Do you have kind of like advice for maybe other women or other people who want to get into computer science and programming, that maybe don't know where to start or are worried about starting? Anything like that?
I think for me at least, like there's a lot of resources online that are just really, really good. Like just YouTube channels. For example, for like C#, there's a really good channel that covers like Unity and C# called Brackies. So there's just like a wealth of different resources out there. So I think just going for it, if you want to like make something, it doesn't matter what you make it in, kind of thing. Just like have a go at making something, and Scratch is quite a good one to start off with, or something like that. And just, yeah, I think just going for it and doing it is like the best way really to start.
That's great. That's great advice.
For me, I think as an Arab, I believe, especially in the Arab world, most women are afraid of entering courses such as mechanical or electrical or mechatronics and robotics, which is a mix of both, because mainly it's men territory. So I say, get motivated to go in there, especially because you don't know what's going to happen next. And technology is the future. And maybe some stuff will change around, and it becomes less of male territory, more of both of us. Especially now, since I'm saying that because now there's very little women on the course. So it's really intimidating. But yeah, I'd encourage everyone to try, give it a go. And it's really simpler than it looks. And all the resources are available online, like Laura said. And it's fun.
Amazing. It's great endorsement. It's fun. That's what we want. So yeah, that's brilliant advice. Thank you so much. So what's kind of like next for you guys? Are you going to keep learning C++? Do you have plans to kind of make your own video game maybe in the future?
Maybe, yeah, why not? I am planning to continue learning C++, and I've already asked my module leader if we're going to take it in next years, and we are, so this is really exciting. And I'm planning to try to use it not only for module, as I said, because we're going to implement it on robots, but I also want to give it a try, making my own video game a try, especially over summer when I have a lot of free time. So yeah.
Amazing. And Laura?
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping to sort of build up like a bit of a portfolio, so of like games and stuff, because I've made one game before, like just a little thing as a project, and I just really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, I've got like lots of different ideas in my head, but I've not like sort of gone and started making one of them yet. But yeah, just excited to do more and learn more, really. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then I think for me as well, I plan on continuing to learn C++ both on my learning days at Sumo Digital, and then also in my spare time. The closest I've come to making a game is last year when I did that Python course, was making like your own version of Space Invaders. I really enjoyed that, and I got a real sense of accomplishment from that. So hoping to be able to do that properly with C++ at some stage as well. But, C++, and I think it's important to know, it isn't just for games. I think games is a really great way to learn it because it's a lot more fun, and you get to see kind of how the mechanics of it work. But it's used in security, it's used in banking, it's used in a lot of different industries. I just think games is the most fun way to learn it, and it is obviously a very key language in programming and games too.
That's a really great point. Yeah, so I think Jake said that the creator of C++ works in banking.
Yeah.
So that's something I didn't know. I thought they would have worked in games for sure, but that's really interesting because it's so, I guess, efficient and fast a programming language. So yeah, that's an excellent point. So we might see games from you in the future, but also robotics as well. That'd be really, really cool. So I was going to ask as well, Georgina, about your experience working for Sumo Digital as well. It's obviously quite a huge company, but there are offices in Sheffield, and lots of people I think would probably quite like to work for Sumo Digital. So I'd love to know about your experience and if you've got any advice for people as well.
Yeah, of course. So in regards to like my experience, so I started last year in the middle of a lockdown. So even though I will be based out of Sheffield, I've never actually been to the studio. I've never been to the office. I don't actually know what that's like. But in regards to kind of working for Sumo, everyone who I've dealt with, you know, from technical directors to graduate programmers, have been really great to deal with. Everyone's really helpful. Everyone's really keen to help each other as well. So a few people know that I'm trying to learn C++, and I've had a lot of people offer advice and say, you know, that they're happy to help where they can as well. The best thing I could say in regards to actually getting into gaming, and the best piece of advice I can give there is, especially for women, a lot of women won't apply to roles unless they meet every single criteria. They'll think, oh, okay, well, even though I have this experience, I'm missing this, so I'm not going to apply. And, you know, if that is you, because I know that was me, don't do it. Apply to the job. You have nothing to lose. And, you know, in a lot of circumstances, that one thing that you feel like you're missing, it can be taught anyway. So it doesn't matter that you don't have that experience yet. So I definitely suggest that. And then also just to persevere, because sometimes it can be difficult to get into games, and it can be a difficult industry to get into. You might find you're sending a couple of different applications off quite often, but once you get in, you know, it's a really great industry to be in, and I'd recommend it to anyone.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, I definitely feel guilty of not feeling like I've got the right experience, and I know lots of people have as well. Yeah, so that's a great piece of advice, and you always find that you probably make up for it in other areas as well of your expertise, so don't discount that too. So thank you so much. So do you have sort of, well, I've kind of asked you what next. I was going to see if we have any questions, but I'm not sure that we do, so I'm just going to tell the chat, if you do have any questions, you can pop them in the chat really quickly. So do you have sort of any more like advice, or what was I going to say, sort of, yeah, any more advice for either getting into games? Georgina, you've kind of covered that, but also with like physics or robotics, like would you like to talk more about like what the kind of work that you do generally day to day on your courses or in your job? Which one wants to start? Laura, would you like to start?
I think I'm not sure like for advice for physics, just because I kind of decided after I'd done it, like, oh, I'm not sure this is really for me, but I think it's kind of similar in that part of it is just having that like first leap and just going like, oh well, I really like this, why shouldn't I do it, kind of thing. I think that's really, especially with like lockdown and everything, it really made me like reevaluate just, I guess, life in general. And I was thinking, you know, I've always liked games, why haven't I just gone for this, you know, kind of thing. And that's really the reason like I started trying to make games, because when I did my degree and I did the programming course, I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. And I was like, you know, this makes perfect sense to kind of go for that. But I'd just always been too scared and just seen it as like impossible to get into. But I think it's just you know, believing that you can do it, kind of thing.
Thank you. That's really, like, really inspirational. That's Nice to know. It's nice to know as well that you can do sort of an unrelated degree and still use maybe what you've learned and apply it in other ways and learn new skills and decide to go into games afterwards as well. Like, that's one thing that we sort of promote at the museum, is that you don't necessarily even have to want to go into games to make games. Like, you can still learn really valuable skills making games and like have a really sort of fun creative outlet making games too. So you don't have to necessarily go, I'm going to go into games, that's why I'm going to learn how to code in C++ or anything else like that. So it's really, really good advice. So I don't think we've had any questions, so I'm going to say thank you very much, unless there's anything that anybody would like to add. But if not, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm going to introduce the kind of the next section of the video, which is the resources that Sumo Digital have released to help sort of, it's aimed at A-level students, but anyone can use them as well. Get involved and start learning C++ and coding your own video game. So it's the video that I'm going to introduce is narrated by Laura, which is this way. Thank you so much. So you'll get to hear her lovely voice, talk you through the project. So it's recommended that you obviously watch this video and pause and go through it at your own pace. So we're going to kind of play the whole thing through, and you'll be able to go back later on, pause the video and follow the instructions. All of the resources, everything that you need will be in the description box down there somewhere. So you can download everything and start making your own games as well. So thank you so much. I'm getting my directions wrong, but Laura and Georgina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. And, you know, if anyone has any questions about Sumo Academy or anything like that, please feel free just to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will try and answer any questions that I can.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, and good luck to everyone who's going to give this a try.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I will see you
Bye.
later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hello, my name is Lara Abu Noor. I'm a student studying mechatronics and robotics engineering at the University of Sheffield. We recently had an amazing opportunity to attend some online workshops in game programming with the Sumo Digital Academy, and we thought it would be great to help provide a similar opportunity to the next generation of aspiring programmers. This tutorial will get you started with free tools and resources for making 2D games in the C++ programming language. To keep things simple, we'll begin by modifying an existing tutorial game called Sky High Spy. If you enjoy this, then more resources will be available to download at the end. This tutorial was created with A-level computer science students in mind, but so long as you have previous programming experience in a language like Python, you should be able to follow it. We're using C++ because it is the native language for game development, and most mainstream game engines are created using it. Like with spoken languages, it can take many years to become fluent in a programming language, so why not get a head start in the competition? Learning C++ is more fun with games. So we're using the Play Buffer library developed by the Sumo Digital Academy. This is the game we'll be modifying. It's based on the Agent 8 character from Sumo Spider game for the Apple Arcade. In the main game mode, Agent 8 has to leap between asteroids and collect gems. But we're going to introduce some new features of our own for this tutorial. The tool we're going to be using for creating our game is called Visual Studio. It's a development environment which helps programmers to write code in a range of different programming languages. You can think of it as a bit like the programming equivalent of Microsoft Word. You'll need to begin by downloading the free community edition of the tool from Visual Studio website. On the website, you'll need to download the Community 2019 edition and then open the installer once it has finished downloading. You'll need to press Continue to start the installation process, and then select the Desktop Development with C++ option before clicking Install. Once Visual Studio has finished installing, use the link in the video description to download resources for this tutorial. The resources are stored in a .zip file, and so right-clicking on the archive and selecting Extract All, and then Extract will unpack them ready for the tutorial. Double-clicking on the SWiCS solution will launch Visual Studio and load the project. There are a few pop-ups that only appear the first time you launch Visual Studio. Press OK, maybe later, and then select your preferred color scheme before selecting Start Visual Studio. Visual Studio can sometimes produce an error here the first time you launch it. If it does, then just close the program and reopen the solution again, and everything should be fine. To check you have successfully loaded the solution, you should be able to open one of the project files within SWiCS project folder. Try editable.cpp, as this is the file you will be editing in the tutorial. Press the green play button to compile and run the code, and then the red stop button again to return to editing in Visual Studio. Okay, now you're all set up. Take some time to play the original game. The goal in each level is to collect all the gems which are embedded inside the asteroids. Use the left and right arrow keys to move around the surfaces of asteroids, or gradually turn in the air. Detonate your current asteroid using the spacebar and try to avoid the flaming meteorites. Okay, now stop your game and return to editable.cpp. This is called a source file, and it is where we will write all the code for this tutorial. It already contains a number of functions, which are blocks of code which perform a specific task. The game calls these functions to determine how to behave, and changing them will alter what the game does. Let's look at the first function in more detail, as it serves as a really simple example. The first keyword defines the type of value returned by the function. In this case, it's a Boolean, which simply means it can either be true or false. The next part is the name of the function. It is up to you what you choose to call your functions. The names are just to provide meaning to programmers. However, as we're working with an existing game, it is expecting to find functions with certain names, and the tutorial will break if you change them. Next comes opening and closing brackets. Some functions will include extra information inside these brackets, but this one doesn't, so we'll skip over that for now. Next, we have an opening curly bracket, and it's important to notice that the whole block of code belonging to the function is contained within opening and closing curly brackets. The function's code must go inside these curly brackets. If you accidentally delete one of the curly brackets, then the code won't compile. This is a really simple function. All it does is return false to tell the game not to run the tutorial environment. Change this function so that it returns true instead to activate the tutorial features. Note that the code statements in C++ always end in a semicolon. Miss this off and the code won't compile. Most errors by beginners in C++ are a result of a missing semicolon, so this is something to watch out for. You've probably noticed that editable.cpp contains a lot of other functions too. These can be used to control the difficulty of the game, but instead of returning true or false, they return different kinds of numbers. Those that have a return type of int return whole numbers, and those that have return floats return decimal numbers. Try changing the return values of some of these functions and running the game, although be careful not to go too crazy, as the game can stop working properly. Next, we're going to look at making the rocket move. To do this, you're going to know a bit about the way the screen coordinates work. we specify positions on the screen using x and y coordinates. The x coordinate specifies the number of horizontal pixels across the screen from 0 on the left to 1280 on the right. The y coordinate specifies the number of vertical pixels down the screen from 0 at the top to 720 at the bottom. To get our rocket moving, we'll need to code the update player movement function. This is a void function, which means it doesn't return anything. Instead, it has 4 parameters: the x, y, angle, and the speed of the rocket. The ampersand in front of each parameter means that these properties will be modified in the game when you change them inside the function. We're going to begin by changing the rocket's x and y position, but bear in mind that update player movement is called 60 times per second, so small changes make a big difference. For example, this code moves the coordinate of the rocket by just 1 pixel in every frame. Using the play column keydown function inside this if statement allows us to test if a key is being pressed. Note that the condition is placed inside the brackets and the code block is placed inside curly brackets in a similar style to the functions. Using this as an example, see if you can make the ship move up, down, left, and right. And here are the solutions. Well, hopefully that wasn't too tricky, but that's not exactly how we would expect a rocket to move in a game like this. We would want to control the rotation and the speed of the rocket. To achieve this, we'll break things down into main steps. First, making the rocket rotate and then moving it forward in the direction it is facing. Step 1 is relatively easy. Carefully delete the code you wrote that moved the rocket up and down the screen. Then adapt the code that moved the rocket horizontally using the left and right arrow keys so that it changes the angle of the rocket instead. Note that angles in C++ are radians, not degrees. There are only around 6.3 radians in a full rotation, so you'll need to keep the number small. Try coding this now. And here are the solutions. The next step is a little more complicated. We need to change the rocket's x and y position so that it moves forward at its current angle. That means at 0 pi radians, it needs to reduce its y position to move up. At half pi radians, it needs to increase its x position to move right. At pi radians, it needs to increase its y position to move down. And at 1.5 pi radians, it needs to decrease its x position to move left. Okay, well, those 4 directions are easy, but what about all the angles in between? For example, at 0.393 radians, we need to know how far to move the rocket in x and y in order to move it forward at its current speed. This forms a triangle. Does this remind you of anything? Well, maybe this will trigger your memory. Do you remember Soka-Toa? You can see from the animation that the change in the rocket's x position follows a sine wave. In terms of a triangle, we know that the sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. In other words, the sine of the rocket's angle equals the change in x divided by the speed. Rearranged, we can say that the change in x equals sine of the angle multiplied by the speed. Similarly, you can see from the animation that the change in the rocket's y position follows an inverted cosine wave. It's inverted because screen coordinates increase down the screen. In terms of a triangle, we know that cosine of theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. In other words, the cosine of the rocket's angle equals to the change in y divided by the speed. Rearranged, we can say that the change in y equals cosine of the angle multiplied by the speed. So, this is the code we need to move the rocket forward in the direction it is facing at any angle. Because we multiply by the speed, it means that this code will work even when the rocket is not moving, as when speed is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. Integrate this code in your update player movement function and make the speed increase and decrease when you press the up and down arrow keys. Try coding this now. And here are the solutions. Now we've got our rocket moving the way we wanted it to. We're going to give you a few more open-ended tasks to test your programming skills. First, try adding some friction to the rocket's movement to gradually slow it down. Although you wouldn't really get friction in space, we sometimes add it in space games if it makes them more fun to play. Think about how you might get the speed to gradually slow down on its own. And here are the solutions. Next, you can try making the rocket shoot lasers. Create laser is a function we can call in our code to create a new laser object with a specified position, angle, and speed. You should be able to use this function to create lasers when the player presses the spacebar. However, you'll need to implement the update laser movement function to make the lasers move forward in the direction they're facing. And here are the solutions. The laser won't have any effect until you implement the code for is laser colliding with asteroid. This compares the coordinates of a laser and an asteroid to see if they are close enough to have collided. If they have collided, then it should return true, and if they haven't, then it should return false. Note that the parameters don't use the ampersand, so changing them won't move the laser or asteroid's actual position in the game. The distance between the laser and the asteroid can be thought of as a right-angle triangle. So think about whether Pythagoras' theorem could help here. If so, you may find the C++ SQRT function helpful. It returns the square root of any number in C++. And here are the solutions. Congratulations on taking your first steps to becoming a C++ game programmer. You've learned about functions, data types, and parameters. You've applied trigonometry to create a simple space game, but above all, you've learned do not forget the semicolon. We hope you've enjoyed working through this tutorial. If you'd like to go on to learn how to make a complete game from scratch, then follow the links in the video description to download the Play Buffer manual. This will show you how to make your own simple shoot-'em-up game. But once you're familiar with the Play Buffer, you could use it to make any kind of 2D game you like. Many thanks to the Sheffield Women in Computer Science Society for organizing the original workshop events, and the National Videogame Museum for their support with making this tutorial available.